It's the Smart Driving Cars podcast. Thank you for tuning in once again. This edition is made possible by CARTS, the Corporation for Automated Road Transportation Safety, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to safe and high-quality mobility for all. I'm Fred Fishkin, along with the Faculty Chair of Autonomous Vehicle Engineering at Princeton University, Alain Kornhauser. Good morning, Alain.
Hey, good morning, Fred.
Good morning, and joining us this week from Sweden once again, Michael Sena, consultant and publisher of The Dispatcher. Hi, Michael.
Good morning, good afternoon. Great to be here again.
Michael, always looking forward to our discussion.
We never know where it's going to go, but we're glad it gets there.
Absolutely.
Well, Michael, you never shy away from tackling the big ones, and leading off in the March edition of The Dispatcher is this headline. It is time we admitted that the world will change. The de-industrial revolution has begun. You have some really eye-opening numbers here. What's happening with the population in China and with vacant office space in New York City? There's a lot to take in here.
Yeah, well, I started by saying that there were two pieces of information that popped up during the last month or so that got me thinking about this whole issue of deindustrialization. And then it was at the same time as I was taking a look at or beginning a new book that I had seen advertised in one of my publications, Slouching Towards Utopia by J. Bradford DeLong. Putting all these things together, the first is that it's looking very much like China is going to be a shadow of its current self before this century ends, probably a lot sooner than before the end of the century. The birth rate hasn't really stabilized. It's begun to go down, and they've tried everything to keep the country from having too many children. It doesn't seem that anything that they did really had any effect at all. It's other external forces that are working, and now it's following Japan and South Korea in terms of fertility rate. So that the projections now are for the country to be, half of what it is now within the next 70 years. The second piece of information that came through was that New York City's occupancy rate, or let's say, put it another way, their office space occupancy has not recovered from pre-pandemic. It's currently around 50% of what it was before the pandemic. And the new mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, is now trying to work out, what do we do with this additional office space? How do we come back to where we were before? Can we? His suggestion, it seems that he's thinking that perhaps instead of filling these offices up with office workers, that they can convert the offices into residences. And then I go into what would that actually mean? I mean, there's enormous numbers of businesses that are based on having the people coming in every day, and it's not the same as having people who are living there. So those are the two things that got me started on the idea that things really are changing, and it wasn't a blip on the radar. This was, and it disappeared. This is really there, and it's coming closer and closer into view, and the implications of the fact that it looks like we're re-entering the artisan society, pre-industrial revolution, where people lived and worked at home, and decanting from the cities that were created as a result of the Industrial Revolution, which primarily started in Great Britain in the mid-1700s and then spread into the rest of Europe and eventually into the United States, where it got going around 1870. Creating new cities allowing the existing cities to not blossom necessarily, but to mushroom, to explode. And then we've had the same experience in China, where new cities have grown as a result of people coming from the rural areas into the cities where they've had to locate in order to work in the factories that were built there. I mean, this whole process, and I think this is something that we haven't really talked very much about it, and we haven't really discussed how this has all occurred. It's we were born and cities were there, and things happened in cities, and we talk about congestion and what are we going to do with parking and all of these other things. But the cities weren't there to the same extent as they were after the Industrial Revolution started. And it's only been, in the United States, it's been 150 years, and in Britain it's been maybe 250 years, where these cities like Liverpool and Manchester and many others have grown, and it's the same throughout all of Europe and all of the other parts of the world, where people have relocated. And now it doesn't seem that it's all that necessary for people to be in cities to the same extent. It's not that cities are necessarily going to go away, but if we look at Detroit as an example, as a big example, or Scranton or Trenton as lesser examples, these cities are, in the case of Detroit, a third of its size. In the case of Scranton and Trenton, half of the size that they were when they industrialized, when they were founded, when they were centers of industry. And at the same time, we have cities like Austin and Phoenix, which have just, if you look at the numbers, the number of people who are living there compared to what just a few years ago, 50 years ago, even less, these cities are huge. And it's not because of industrialization. It's just because people have moved to places where they feel that they want to live, where they can expand, have a home, and the jobs have been there as well. I mean, but they're not industrial jobs. They're primarily thinking about how things will be manufactured someplace else, as opposed to manufacturing them in place. So this is something that's really major. And it is going to have some enormous implications and repercussions on everything, especially transport.
I think that it's really great what you wrote here, and it's captivating, and it is of course really good because of the perspective you put everything in. But if you sort of look, the fundamentals of industrialization is that you brought resources, energy, and then you needed human flexibility, intelligence, muscle power to bring those things together to produce something somewhat efficiently such that it could serve markets. You had an assembly line putting together a car. And so you needed a ton of people to grab stuff, put stuff, and the whole process to do that. But if you look at office work, why is, as I like to say, Goldman Sachs, bringing a ton of people down to Wall Street every day to sit on computers and phones? I guess they do interact personally a little bit, but they don't need to be together. Yet if you're at Henry Ford's assembly line trying to make a car, you better be there with the wrench because you didn't happen to have a robot there that did the wrench. And so you needed a human there. And so if we're going to produce things like this shirt instead of in lower Manhattan in the garment district, where you had to have a ton of people there to, some sewed buttons, some did logos. I don't know what they did.
I do. My mother was a
Yeah,
seamstress.
yes. No, yeah, no, understood. But you don't need the people there to produce it, and then you look at doing it efficiently, economically, environmentally, da. You don't need to bring them together. And so the why? I mean, you need a bunch of people in Detroit to work the lines. You needed a bunch of people in Trenton to make ceramics and cars. General Motors had a plant, assembly plant there. I don't know if it was a parts plant. I don't know what kind of plant it was, but whatever kind of plant it was, and all those things. But now, look at us. Now, of course, we would love to be together, kumbaya or whatever, but we come reasonably close, and on an efficiency basis, whether you include energy, time, money, whatever in your efficiency equation, this is a pretty darn good medium to do this. We really don't need to be together.
Yeah,
and if we're going to be post-industrialization, then we're post that. I don't know what we're into. Okay. Yeah, I don't know where it's going to take. It's now 8 billion people on the planet. I have no idea, but that ship sailed.
It's interesting, though, because you do see some companies today. You see some headlines saying that I guess they're large corporations for the most part that are starting to require people to come back into the office at least most of the time. But maybe on a broader scale, the companies that aren't quite so big are realizing the savings and the efficiencies that, no, they don't have to come back into the office. Any thoughts, what we're seeing there, how that's working out?
Yeah, but I think this began well before the pandemic. The pandemic just allowed it to take a very, very quickly take form, and we could see how things worked without people being together. Now, this is not everybody. You can't get firemen doing their job over the internet. So we are the non-essential workers. I mean, the essential workers, people who worked in the hospitals, and I was going to say school teachers, but even to a certain extent, school teachers, depending on the year. But there are lots of people who have to do their job every day, and that included the people who were watching the robots making the cars. That they couldn't just stay at home. There had to be people there, and it's not a huge percentage that can stay at home. It's a greater percentage of people that need to be where they need to be, and we could see that after the first month or two of the pandemic. We saw with traffic, being recreated. People weren't getting on buses and on subways underground, but they were getting in their cars because they had to get to work. The companies couldn't continue to operate without people there. So it wasn't 50%. It was more like 60 to 70% of the people had to be in work. But 30% is a large number. And then now when you look at the vacancy rates in New York City of 50%, that could probably go down even more, because there are lots of non-essential people who could just as easily stay home, whether it's in Staten Island or in Princeton, and not get on the dinky and go to get on the train and then go into New York City or Philadelphia. And if they don't have to do that, they don't have to live in Morristown. They don't have to live in a state where the taxes are high. They can move to Texas, and they can do the jobs that they want to do, and they can go play golf or to Phoenix or San Diego. Well, no, not San Diego's in California. Phoenix, and do what they like to do when they're not working, and still continue to do the job that they do when they are working. And this doesn't, I think one of the reasons why this isn't really being discussed is because the whole narrative has been kidnapped, hijacked by the climate group who want people to be living in cities, because there we can control all of their movements. They can walk and take electric bicycles and do all of this great stuff. Whereas if you look at the real numbers, where people are moving and moving out of and moving to, people aren't going down to Phoenix to live in a high-rise apartment building. They aren't going to Austin, to live in a Park Avenue condo. They're moving to these places so that where they've got space, where the land is cheap, and they can expand into huge amounts of area and have a house that fits their income. So if it's a 2,000 square foot house, or a 4,000 square foot house, or a 10,000 square foot house, whatever they can afford, they can build in these places because the land is there.
If you have to dig a ditch, you have to go where the ditch needs to be dug.
Sure.
If you have to repair a bridge, you have to go to the place where the bridge needs to be repaired. And those places tend to be distributed in many cases and don't require that many folks, but some, to do that. But the large sort of organizational bringing together to produce things, one with a large number of people, seems to be behind us instead of ahead of us, because we're replacing many of the things that we don't do very well and don't really want to do by robots that can do that. Okay, but we still need some people.
Yeah.
But then if you look at the office building, I mean, really, they're all in there in some big conference room, all interchanging all day long. I'm stuck here in the Princeton bubble, so I don't see it. Although I must admit, if it comes to education, teaching, there's no doubt. I mean, I have tough enough time communicating in a classroom. Communicating over this stuff it helps. The MIT lecture series is fantastic, done on Zoom. But that's one component. That's one component, and we can take all this distributed interaction and actually enhance the product that we're trying to pursue. But it still is going to require some coming together by some. But the issue is you require the enormous masses that exist that we were still doing just a few years ago, and especially the kinds of things that are produced in downtowns doesn't seem to be necessarily the place where those things should be produced. And if you look at the trials and tribulations that somebody has to go to get there and get out of there, because it's focused and it has everybody going in, because they maybe need to be, the whole thing is like condensed because they sort of need to be there at the same time and so on, apparently. Whew. I mean, you got to use Metro North or New Jersey Transit, and I guess that's kind of good. I mean, New Jersey Transit rail service is really very good. But
I think this is going to change. This is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Now, this is going to change. It's not that old. We haven't been doing it for that long. It began in the United States around 150 years ago. That's not a long time. There's so much, and the reasons that it occurred. If you really go back to it, why did we concentrate in the first place? Why didn't we build a lot of these small things around? And it was because the energy needed to be transmitted to the things that were building these. The more it was concentrated, the less money that was spent in order to get the things done. We didn't have a distributed system in the early days with electricity where you could be in different places. Of course, we didn't have any communication method. We didn't have the telephone. We had telegraph. We didn't have an immediate form of telegraph. So all of these technologies that were necessary created the need to have concentrated cities. And it happened over a very short period of time. And then, for example, cities like Scranton and Trenton, they had a life which was less than 50 years when they were in the growth period. And then it just tailed off. I mean, there was, in the early 1900s, Scranton was larger, much larger than Phoenix. I mean, Phoenix was a little dot. In fact, even Los Angeles, at a point in time, Los Angeles in the early 1900s really hadn't grown to any size at all. So these things they're not that old, which means that they can also change. That's why I started the article by talking about Rome and talking about Constantinople. History does have lessons for us if we just spend a little bit of time and think about them and read about them. We can learn a lot about where we're going by looking a little bit in the past. So it was fun to write.
You have some advice here for automakers and such, and I guess you can talk about the ramifications on transport. What you feel this means
under the title of getting to 2100 and beyond. I said at the outset that things are going to be very different at the start of the next century compared with how they are today, but it may not look and feel that way. That's another thing. And I've got these pictures. One is a street scene by Edward Hopper, one of my favorite artists, that looks very similar to Raleigh, North Carolina in 2022. Hopper's was in 1934. When I go back to Scranton, it looks pretty much like it looked when I was growing up. Now, that was like half a century ago, almost as long as it's going to take to get to the next century. Things they don't change that often. They don't change that much. If you go to Istanbul today, it looks a lot like Constantinople looked in 1743. There are changes that occur dramatically, like the cities in Ukraine, which are being bombed out of existence by the Russians. Those kinds of changes occur. They sort of can be fixed if you look at what's been done in many of the cities that were destroyed during the World War II and World War I. But I have an image of a residential tower block in Shanghai, China, which I don't think that kind of way of living is going to last very long because of what's occurring now, people not having to go to cities. So I have some advice. One of my piece of advice is to the Chinese, to change their laws so that the people who are migrating to the cities can actually live there and not have to go back to where they came from, because they'd have to do that today. They can't bring their families to the cities. The kids can't go to school in the cities. They have no health care. They have no medical facilities. They have to go back. This migration that occurs, which was the beginning of the pandemic, when that started, they have to leave the cities and go home because that's where their families are. They can't bring their families into the cities. So there are certain things, fundamental things that are going to change, I believe. But when it comes to our friends who are building cars, the car companies have done a very good job, I think, over the last 100 years of changing to meet the needs of individuals. They have modified. They haven't morphed into other companies, but they have created products that people over these years have wanted to buy. And I think that they can continue to do that. Without any involvement or meddling by either the European Union or the federal government of the United States, of telling them, forcing them into doing things, which may turn out to be a very bad idea. I mean, the car companies have done pretty well. They've had some assistance in making the car safer, thanks to good legislation. The creation of NHTSA was a very good thing that they've done. But when you start telling them how to build their cars and what kind of cars to build, that's where you're going to start to get yourself in trouble. That's like saying, this is the industry that we should be getting into. Let's put a lot of money into being in this industry. That hasn't worked out well at all. I mean, we can see the results of that in Russia. If you've got economies that are being pushed into what they should be doing by bureaucrats and politicians, they generally don't know what they're doing. So the companies that have done the right things, that have been able to change, they're still in business. The companies that have not done that, they're long gone. Companies like Saab, for example, and a few others we can talk about. I know there's a lot to digest in this. There's a lot to discuss, and I think that I hope that folks will read it and have some ideas and send back their ideas to me. I've had some comments already that have come in, but I think it's something that we can take as a bigger issue and discuss it in more depth. I'd like to see more thought being put into this, particularly by the automobile industry. And one thing that they should be doing is getting out of this. I'm going to listen to you, and then you're going to tell me what to do, and then I'm going to do it, and everything's going to be fine, and start to be proactive and say, this is what we should be doing. This is how we should be working. And this goes for people who are making cars and people who are building cities and trying to manage cities.
You have another section, Michael, and of course second the motion that people should be reading the full article here. It's
absolutely.
Really amazing.
This is a slow read, not a fast read. I know some of the things that are presented to us not today. They even say, "Hey, you can read this in 3 minutes and then move on to the next thing," which kind of drives me nuts. I mean, really, this is one that you want to sit and you want to think about. With respect to these issues, because this is a somewhat big play because of the transformation that is happening here, and then the implications on a whole bunch of things. Michael did mention the response of the car manufacturers. I mean, if you look, they are, over the last 50 years, sort of my professional life, they've become a heck of a lot more efficient, a heck of a lot more environmentally responsible, a heck of a lot safer, and a heck of a lot more comfortable and everything. And my goodness, I used to have to be under my car more than I was in it, repairing it. And I don't even, I haven't. The car that I drive, I don't know that I've ever opened the hood. I mean, my goodness, the thought of 50 years ago, I would be driving a car that, I don't even look under the hood. What the heck have I turned into? I mean, my goodness, I've lost that. I know I've lost it, but I didn't realize how completely I've lost it. So,
I used to have to spray something in the carburetor to get the thing to start sometimes.
Oh my goodness! You should have seen me with a leaf blower yesterday. I mean, I'm just never. But I did fix it.
Does it take a leaf blower to get your car started?
No, it was something else that I was. I'm clean. Never mind. I've become doing yard work guy. I'd finally found my profession. Maybe I'm not very good at it. I guess I'm.
Michael, from the Dispatch Central section here, you take a look at run flat tires, and Michelin has what they call unique puncture-proof tire system. I mean, to most of us, boy, the idea sounds pretty great. Yeah,
well, it is pretty great, and I think I thank our friend Ken Pyle for putting me on to this issue with the smart tire company, which may or may not be around for a while, but there are enough companies like Michelin who are developing tires which most likely are not going to require air in the future. They're not going to be able to blow out and cause all kinds of awful accidents. And I've got a picture here of the rover, the Mars rover. A lot of this technology is coming to us from space exploration, space technology, including the materials that are going into it. The problem is right now that they can do all of these things but they're very expensive and they're not necessarily very comfortable. But they're getting close. I mean, it's run flat tires now are expensive. They're more expensive when it comes to buying them and especially replacing them. But the next time I look at my tires, I'm going to definitely take a strong look at buying run flat tires, because they're it's a no-brainer. And if you can get on with life without having to get somebody to come and help you out, it's worth it. Definitely worth it.
May not bode well for AAA.
Yeah. Well,
tires are
tires.
Yeah, but tires are so fundamentally important to cars.
Mm.
The ride quality that you get out of the secondary suspension that a tire gives you, that I'm not sure that folks have yet to figure out how to provide that secondary suspension in I'll call it elegant of way, originally with rubber from Vietnam that may have gotten us into that whole problem, so it didn't have its potential who knows what downside associated with it. But to put that in there and to do it, let's say, as effectively and economically responsibly way that the tire companies have done up to this point, and have the extent of the reliability such that, the last time I got a blowout was, I don't know, whatever, a long time ago. I mean, the tire is in some sense part of the marvel of the automobile revolution, or whatever we want to call it, absolutely phenomenal. And to think that you may be able to do this without rubber, without air, and of course, what you do with a tire after it's worn off and put who knows what into the air as it wears, and then have to somehow get rid of it, which are all non-trivial things that people always seem to fail to talk about, but enormously challenging. To think some of that can go away. The front end, we've gone away from the rubber trees, but who knows what we've brought along with us to replace it, and then to have to get rid of it on the downstream. I mean, if one of these tires does work, then maybe the source of the materials, maybe the manufacturing process, maybe the whole thing, in fact, in scale, comes down to order of magnitude reduction in what the cost of tires are, and give you this secondary ride suspension system that's so key to the mobility.
Yeah,
Michael?
But the suspension part is going to have to be taken care of by what's outside of the tire rather than the inside of the tire. All of the upsides, and I pointed them out in the article with what occurs with tires today, the amount of pollution that occurs with them, even if they're burned, they're not recyclable. All of that stuff does go away with a different kind of tire. Now, of course, you have another kind of material that needs to go into it, and that's the problem. The materials are expensive to produce a tire that is flexible, that moves according to the way a car should move. But one of the reasons why I write about these things is to indicate there are good things that are being done by good people. We're looking at a lot of areas where we can both help the climate out as well as improve safety. So for those people, and I'm mentioning people who glue themselves to roads, people who get up in front of large gatherings like at the UN and say, "You're not doing anything. My life is being affected, and you're not doing anything. I have no future because you're going to take the planet away from me." There are lots of people who are doing a lot to ensure that we have a planet in 70 years or so, 77 years, when we get to 2100. That's my little spiel. You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, as we know, I mean, I can't even think of 7 years from now because I'm not going to make it, and I wouldn't want to make it, and so
You never
therefore
know.
that's going to be somebody else's problem. Oh man,
Yeah.
no, look, and people don't want me to make it. I mean, there are enough folks out there that have had enough of me, so
We're going to turn to the latest Smart Driving Cars newsletter in the interest of time here, Alan. So on top, GM's plan to deploy the Cruise Origin is on hold as the feds weigh an exemption request here. And I guess they've had this request in for a little while now.
Yeah, I mean, it is time for me to hang it up because I guess, for some reason, I didn't stumble over the blog post until a few days ago, and I thought it was a recent one from Cruise. They still have it up on their system. This whole issue. I mean, it's been in front of NHTSA for some time. Neuro, I guess, got a positive response. I'm not sure if GM has gotten a positive response yet. Apparently not, or at least I haven't seen it. And my goodness, what GM is trying to do with the Origin vehicle is to really provide some mobility to folks that really don't have good mobility and have been left behind. And it's nice to see that NHTSA is making sure that everything is safe. But NHTSA has two objectives, really. One is safety, but they also have a mobility objective. Because if their objective is only safety, then the best way to get safety is have everybody stay at home. Then there won't be any crashes, okay? But what makes their safety a real challenge is that they also need to champion mobility. And so there's a trade-off there that they have to do between those two things. Otherwise, if you want to extremize safety and get everybody safe, stay home. As I like to say, if I don't travel, I stay home, my house might burn down and I'll die in a fire or something. And therefore, maybe I would have been better off traveling. I know that's a little flippant and whatever, but it's, so they have a mobility objective. And if there is something that comes forward that has the opportunity to really enhance mobility, if, for example, you don't bother with a sun visor, or you don't bother with a steering wheel, because what the steering wheel creates an electrical signal that then goes to a motor that then turns the steering stuff. What do you do? Do you really need the wheel? Maybe the wheel's unimportant. What's the purpose of the wheel? Crush into my chest or collapse as it crushes in my, what's the big deal here? And the opportunity that the Origin vehicle provides to me is the opportunity to take the driverless experience that Cruise has developed in at least some places some of the time, and put a vehicle in there that can actually have an opportunity to provide, safe, affordable, because it's a shared ride vehicle. As I point out, and once again, my elevator analogy. My goodness, we wouldn't have to worry about the high rises in Shanghai having anybody live in them if they didn't have elevators. Boy, nobody would take the steps. Or if they had elevators that were personal elevators, only took one person. Maybe in Trump Tower, okay? But every other ones, the demand responsiveness of an elevator to accommodate surges essentially as easily as it accommodates one, but because it accommodates surges in demand where it's natural to have people just do it together because they happen to show up at the same time, going to about the same place, and share that elevator, then the efficiency, the economy, the sustainability, the everything else associated, the equity, all of a sudden comes from that. So what's the origin vehicle? It's a vehicle that may be able to do that horizontally in some places in some time. My goodness, NHTSA should be out saying, GM, please produce this, because this helps us meet our mobility objective part. We're a public agency. It's not just one, hey, just safety, the hell with everything else. We have safety and mobility. Because otherwise, if it's, hey, I'm not going to repeat myself. Michael?
So we're waiting here, I guess, for NHTSA.
Yeah, I guess we're waiting, and people are waiting at the bus stop, and there's no bus coming, and they can't get to where they want to go, and they have to walk. They have to use the steps. You have to use the steps in the apartment building. You're definitely not living in there. Okay.
What I've not seen from NHTSA nor any other transport agency, and what I've not seen from any of these car companies, any of the companies that are producing cars which don't have steering wheels and don't have controls and don't have drivers, is a context. I mean, they have talked about operational design domains as if it's something that's sort of magical. You know, this thing operates in it, and for them, an operational design domain is Phoenix. It's San Francisco. It's it's Midtown Manhattan, as opposed to the complete context. If you don't have an idea of how these vehicles are going to be used, how they're going to transport people, how they're going to get them from where they are to where they're going to go, if you just say, well, it's just like any other car, it's going to do exactly what everything else does, except it's not going to have a driver. That's insane. So NHTSA doesn't have a framework.
It's insane. It's insane. It's not reachable. It's just you got to cut it out.
Yeah, I mean, NHTSA doesn't have a framework for evaluating this, and that's why they're taking so long to do it. And these companies, instead of saying, there's this idea that this guy, we know that he's kind of strange and he has weird ideas, but there's this guy over in Princeton. He's been talking about this concept of, he's put a name on it called Trenton Moves, but that's not the point. This is how it's going to work. Let's try to do this. And then you give something to NHTSA that they can evaluate, and you give something to the companies that are producing this that they can actually try to implement. And now you've got something. Right now we've got nothing. We've got a car that's going to run around without a steering wheel, and we have no idea how it's going to work and what it's going to do. We know that other cruise vehicles have had problems when they haven't had drivers, right? They have cars running around in San Francisco without drivers at strange times. The same is true with Waymo down in wherever they're operating, and we know that there are problems related to this, as opposed to, we have a complete solution here. We're going to do this. This is how it's going to work, and this is how we're going to carry people, and this is what we're going to try to prove, and we can actually evaluate the result of this, and then you can make the next step. You can make the next decision. We're not doing that. We're just saying, let us do it, and we'll be okay.
I guess they have the objective is they want to do it everywhere at all time. Oh yeah, hey, great, let's do it everywhere at all time. Sure, that may have been an aspiration at some point. My goodness, that is infinitely difficult. Okay, and whether or not we even achieve that by the next century, I doubt it. Certainly, hey, we'll never achieve everywhere every time. The everys are never achieved. Ever, except death and taxes, whatever. Okay? Right. I don't think the GM proposed origin to NHTSA to say, hey, we're going to put this in showrooms and sell it to everybody and have them take it everywhere anytime. I would hope not. Because then NHTSA better come back and say, whoa, that's a heavy lift. But Waymo and GM Cruise, know where their systems work and don't work. And unfortunately, we hear about all the places they don't work because it's, not worth anybody writing about where they do work. They should be out there saying, no, we aren't going to put this where it doesn't work. We have defined an operational design domain. We think it really works well. And in fact, that operational design domain that we've designed this thing where it works well delivers enormous public benefit affordably. Okay? Including environmentally, and if they did that, then maybe at least the people that would use it would stand up and applaud it or just use it. Nobody applauds the elevator. Okay? But my goodness, without that elevator operating automatically without a driver, New York City has building heights of Paris. And, you don't want to go up nobody lives on the 6th floor either. Sorry, whatever.
Well, another headline we want to get to, Alan, autonomous platooning startup Locomation is denying reports that it's closing, but the CEO says the company has reduced most of its non-engineering headcount.
Yeah, I have my own comments with respect to what ends up being written versus what ends up being said versus whatever versus whatever versus whatever. I mean, the miscommunication that's out here is like, I don't know. Okay, and I can imagine the frustration of the Locomation CEO because I see the headlines. Of course, it's in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and then since I'm a Stiller and a Penguin fan, I get the Post-Gazette every morning on my computer. And my goodness, how much more bad news is this technology going to get hit with? Well, so I don't know what the story is. Guess what? Most of us don't know what the inside story is on most things.
Right. Well, from the Insider, this headline, Elon Musk has promised self-driving Teslas for years. Experts say it's not even close. That headline. And then, of course, Elon Musk is due to deliver his next, quote, master plan on Wednesday.
Yeah, and I had a great conversation with Tim Levin for about an hour about this. And the thing that I tried to stress in that conversation is I don't want to talk about full self-driving using that term. We all know it's a terrible name. We all know that Elon should move on from it. We all know there's baggage in the back. It's whatever. We're looking to go forward, not backwards. Okay? And then, of course, the quote that he picks out of, every is not achievable anywhere. That's my statement. Okay. So to say that I'm, whatever with every and to do whatever. So anyway, I am the world's worst communicator. I think about, the very good conversation that I had with Tim compared to the quote that appeared in the article. And I say, oh my goodness, I totally failed in that conversation. So I'm basically, close to putting up a time for me to move on. What the hell have I done in 50 years of trying to teach kids by speaking to them? I guess I accomplished nothing.
I think people should be watching the podcast.
I'm sorry, folks. Spend your time somewhere else. I don't know. Just read Michael's thing and think.
Well, you mentioned before the MIT Mobility Forum. You were the leadoff speaker, and that's continuing. People can find it at mobilityinitiative.mit.edu/events. We want to thank Michael for spending time with us again. Michael, always terrific. Thank you so much.
Always enjoyable to be here, to listen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
The website for Michael is michaellsena.com. Thank you to CARTS, the Corporation for Automated Road Transportation Safety, for helping to make this podcast possible. CARTS is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to safe and high-quality mobility for all. You can find us at smartdrivingcar.com, on Anchor FM, Spotify, TuneIn, Amazon, Apple, Google, Spreaker, wherever you get your podcast from. Smart speakers can play us too. You can find my tech reports at techstination.com. I'm Fred Fishkin along with Alain Kornhauser. Thanks for listening or watching. Please stay safe.